Okay, this screencast is to look at some of the basic functions in Adobe Photoshop CS6. File, open, we'll open up an image to use. It opens up here in the center in the document window. Now we're using an Apple Mac, but mainly the Workspace is very similar to a PC. Now there's three components you need to note. First is the panels that exist down the right side. Lots of panels here to do numerous tasks. Now these panels can be open and closed from the window menu. The ticks are for the open panels, and the ones that do not have ticks are the ones that are closed. Now Photoshop has lots of different workspaces, and if you go from the window menu at the top, it'll have workspaces. Now the Essentials is the default workspace, but depending on what type of job you're working on, you can select the different presets on there. If it's mainly photography, it will present you with the functions photography or typography, but we'll just leave it on Essentials. If at any point your panels get a little bit messed up, you can always go to reset whatever workspace you're on. In this case we're on Essentials, and that will reset everything back to its default locations. Now up at the top you'll see a options bar. Now the options bar works in conjunction with the tools. As you change a tool in the tools panel on the left, that will also change the options up at the top. Now each tool has a yellow flyout, and it has its keyboard shortcut in brackets. So if I wanted to get the move tool, I could press V, and that would then select the move tool. You can memorize these or write them down. Some of them are obvious, some of them are not, but it saves you a lot of mouse work. Now we'll just have a quick look at the basic tools. The move tool is for moving an object around or a selection around, and it's probably the best tool to have. That will do the least amount of damage if you accidentally knock the mouse. Now underneath the move tool, you'll see there's a little sort of triangle icon in the bottom right corner, and that means there's more options. If you keep your finger on the mouse, you'll see there's 4 different selection tools, or what they call marquee tools, for selecting structured objects such as rectangles, circles, and also oblongs. Now underneath that we have the lasso tool, and again it can have a fly out where you've got a number of different options. First one is the lasso tool, the ordinary freehand lasso tool, the polygon one which draws straight lines, and the magnetic one which tries to stick to the edge of an object. Underneath that is more selection tools, the quick selection tool, and the magic wand, which selects areas of the same tone or the same color. These can be quite useful, but sometimes they're not as good as manually selecting and cutting out an object. Underneath that we have the crop tool. There's a number of different options. Older versions had less, but you can crop with a traditional crop tool, crop to a perspective crop, or slice up your object. Underneath this is the pipette or the eyedropper. Embedded in there's lots of other tools. So the eyedropper is good for selecting colors, which we'll come back to later. There's a ruler tool in there. You can add notes as well. Underneath that we have the healing brush tool. Now the healing brush tool is has a number of other options, and mainly these are for touching up and restoring damaged photographs. Underneath the healing brushes there are the ordinary brushes. These are the ordinary paint brushes, pencil, and you can replace color, and there's a mix brush tool. Underneath this there's the clone tool. Now the clone tool is again a retouching tool, and you clone one area on top of another. Underneath that is the history brush tool and the art history brush tool, because it acts as an undo for when you're painting. If you're painting on top of an image and you make some mistakes, if you rub it out, it will rub the image out underneath. With the history brush tool, it will only rub out the actual paint marks and not the object underneath. The art history brush is mainly works as a filter to change your image into like an impressionist drawing. Underneath that is the eraser tool, and there's a number of options. Traditional eraser, one that helps you cut out a background, or the magic eraser that tries to second guess what you want to cut out and selectively deletes this part of the object. Both of those are a little bit hit and miss and not ideal, very much similar to the Magic Wand tool. Underneath this is the gradient tool, the paint bucket tool. Underneath that we have what looks like a teardrop, where you can blur parts of your photograph or sharpen or smudge areas. This is useful when you cut out objects and overlaid them on other images. You can smooth over the edges so they blend better. Underneath here we've got what looks like a lollipop, but it's a dodge tool. This relates to traditional chemical-based darkrooms, where you use to dodge areas to make them lighter, or burn, which means giving a selective area more light so you darken it. Then it has a sponge tool. It either saturates, which makes it more vivid and vibrant in color, or desaturates, which reduces the amount of color. Underneath here we have the pen tool, and this is for drawing vector shapes in Photoshop. Mainly vector shapes are used in Photoshop for creating masks or masking off areas of your image. Underneath that we have the text tool. There's a number of options. The most useful one is the top one, the horizontal text tool. Also down the bottom we have the text mask tool, where you can have an image appearing inside your text. Underneath that we have the path tool, and that's mainly for once vector objects have been created, you use this to amend the paths and adjust your shapes you've created. Underneath here we have the shapes tool. That's a number of different shapes, standard shapes, all the way down to custom shapes, which can also bring up options in the options bar and select a number of different shapes to use in your design work. Under here is the hand tool. Hand tool is used for panning around an image once you've zoomed into it. And then underneath the hand tool there is a zoom tool, and that's used for zooming in and out to magnify your image to work on it in more detail. Underneath here we have the colors. Now there's a black and white square, and that's for changing it back to its default settings, which is foreground color and background color. Why you need to set it back to its default colors is sometimes you might find you've selected pink for your background, then when you're using something like the eraser it will rub out to a pink background. So always try and set that back to its default, which is black for the foreground and white for the background. Underneath that we got the quick edit mask. That's for when you're just making quick masks on your image to mask off areas for editing purposes. Now the final icons are for changing the screen modes. If you click on here it will sort of take your image up to fill the whole screen, not be in a window, or you can click it again and it will be entirely full screen. Mainly this is just for when you're looking at your image and you want to check how you're working on it, or to show someone else and it doesn't have any clutter. If I press escape it will take me back again. Finally, we go through the window menus. As we've mentioned before, the window menu has all the panels on the right. View menu has the standard things you probably find in there. What was useful is rulers and guide settings. You can also zoom in and zoom out. It's got many 3D settings in CS6 for doing 3D text or 3D objects. Depending on your processor on your computer, these may be unattainable or take some time processing because of the lack of power your computer may have. We have filters, and these change an image, which we'll look at later, do things more creatively or try and sharpen it up or improve the quality. Then we've got the select, that's used in conjunction with many of the selection tools. Type, again, is lots of different things for editing and using type. The layer menu, again, everything to do with layers when you're making collages. A lot of what's in these menus are also available in the panels, such as the layers panel. Then the image menu, that edits everything to do with your image, the size, rotate, duplicate. And then the edit menu, again, standard things about editing components on your image. And finally, the standard file menu to open and save for the web, import, export. Also, it's got the automated functions in there too.